Last week I hit a PR on my deadlift. I pulled 600 pounds. Yeah! Which was a lifetime PR, something I've been chasing for a while. So this video is all about how I got to a 600 pound deadlift, as well as technique and things that I suggest when training the deadlift and how to do a proper deadlift. When I did the 600 pounds, I was wearing toe spacers. I have been loving using toe spacers for like squats and deadlifts because it helps you feel your foot pushing into the ground much more fully, I guess. It brings awareness to your foot a lot more. In general, for lifting, you wanna find shoes where like it has a flat sole and you will be able to feel your foot in the ground. If you're using like running shoes or something with just like a lot of cushion in it, you wouldn't deadlift on top of your mattress. So like having a big squishy sole is not the best thing for lifting weights. If you have issues with your back, a lot of times issues in the back are actually coming from tightness in the hips. So the deadlift really should not hurt your back at all. You should really, especially for high rep deadlifts, you should feel it a lot in your glutes and in your hamstrings. You really shouldn't be feeling it in your lower back. If you are pulling with your back or you're in a bad position when you're doing pulls, yeah, your back will hurt. But a lot of times, if your back is just tightening up in a general workout or when you're pulling heavy weights, a lot of times that comes from shortness in the hip flexor. A couple stretches you can do. Highly recommend couch stretch. Also, hip hook. This is something I do pretty much before every lifting session, but especially before heavy deadlifts or high volume deadlifts. This helps loosen your psoas and iliacus and just kind of relaxes those deep inner hip muscles. And later when I talk about technique, I'll show you how to not pull with your back. But first, let's do a couch stretch. So first thing we're gonna do is get an ab mat. Want this ab mat to be in the corner of the wall by starting with our knee on the ground. And then you're gonna put your knee right in the corner of the wall. Okay, now from here, what you wanna do is tuck your hip hard and squeeze your glutes. Okay, we're trying to open up here. If this is pretty easy for you, the next thing you want to do is bring your foot out front. We can sit up tall here, even better, opening more here. Once you can do this pretty well, bringing the foot back and leaning in and pushing your hip towards the floor gets a little bit even more stretch into that hip flexor. So I'll do a couple pulses here, maybe spend about 90 seconds to a minute doing a couch stretch on each side and 90 seconds to a minute on the hip hook on each side. Even though the deadlift is a relatively simple movement, there is some nuance to the way that you do it in order to help you maximize the load that you can lift. We're gonna look at the deadlift in the 3 positions, which is gonna be the set position on the ground, the top of the knee position, and then the finish position with you standing tall with the bar. So for your setup, I like narrow feet for a conventional deadlift. The more narrow your feet are, it gives you a smaller area to push into, right? We're trying to impart force into the ground. So this is a smaller area to push force into than this would be. I also really like close hands. The closer your hands can be, the better leverage you have because the further you can pull your chest away from the bar. One of the reasons that the snatch is really hard is because our hands are so wide, it becomes hard for people to pull their hips down and pull their chest up. All that a mixed grip does is counteract the spin of the bar. So if I hold on here, there's a point where the weight will peel out of my fingertips. If I mix the grip, I just counteract the rotation of the bar. You'll see people where they'll say this is bad for your biceps. If you are very intentional about leaving your arm long, there shouldn't be any issue with the bicep, but it is definitely more common to have a bicep tear on a deadlift with a mixed grip than probably anything else in the gym. All I want to do when I set up for the deadlift is put it just about where my shoes are tied. Close, but not touching. The next thing you're going to do is reach down and grab your grip. From here, we want to wedge ourselves into the set position. Pull the hips back and down and pull the chest forward. Now, as soon as my shins get to mostly vertical, we're ready to pull. We want to hold the shoulder back nice and taut, and we're pinning the lats back into the pockets. This is not a strong position and will get you pulled out of position right as soon as you break the weight off the floor. Our foot is pushing straight down through the ground and elbows are in line with the knees. If your knees are way in front of your elbows, you're squatting it down a little bit too much, and this is more like how we'd pull a clean setup. For the deadlift, we're gonna have vertical shins, hips are slightly higher than a clean, elbows are right in line, and then we're gonna push, holding that angle in your back all the way until the top of the knee. At this top of the knee position, there's a triangle between my thigh, my body, and my arm. And all we're gonna do is bring the back point of the triangle to my elbow by squeezing my hips. Okay, so squeezing the glute is all we wanna do to finish this deadlift. What we don't wanna see is you to lean back and roll the chest open, because this will lead to overarching in the lower back. If you're doing touch and go reps, we wanna make sure that from the top, you are bowing first. We're gonna hinge, and then once we get to the top of the knee, you're gonna drop your hips past there. Set, big toe pushes down, arms are staying long. We're gonna draw the hips down as we draw the shoulder open. As soon as we feel tight, elbows in line with the knees, we're gonna push to the top of the knee, squeeze the glutes hard to finish. We're gonna bow from that finish position back to the top of the knee. And then from here, I'm lowering the bar back down right over where I tie my shoelaces. A couple mistakes that we'll see, especially with heavy deadlifts, is one, people will start the movement with their hips too high, and from here, they can't push down, they can only open the back angle. We wanna make sure that we're able to push off the ground with the legs and then finish with the glutes. Another thing that really held me back for a while is I would set up so aggressively that when I started to break the weight off the floor, it would roll away. So I'd grab on and be really ready, and I'd be like, whew, and I'd start to just kind of swing it away right as soon as I'm breaking it off the floor. While that may work with lighter weights, the heavier it is, if it's off by a little, it's off by a lot. Try to keep the bar as close as you can, all the way off the floor, through the whole lift, and don't let your setup push it out into a funky position that's not gonna help. There are 6 movement patterns and 6 positions that you must master in order to continually progress with fitness. And if you can look at every movement that you're doing like it is part of a system and not just an individual movement, then you will start to see progress rapidly across the board. Check out the link in the description if you want to know more about Technique Team and how I help people connect the dots when it comes to their patterns and positions. Another thing when training deadlifts is wearing a belt. So I have mixed feelings about wearing a belt. In general, I think belts are helpful. I think there is a point where it's not helpful, and you need to learn to develop a strong core, a strong midline. When we breathe and brace for the deadlift, what we want to do is take a big belly breath. So if you set up and you go, and you breathe up here, it's just going to leave your midsection kind of exposed, and it's gonna make it harder rep after rep. So you're gonna take a big fat belly breath, like you're sipping through a straw. You're gonna go, and then blow up your belly and hold that tight down there, okay? If we start to see all this, where you're making air up in the top of your ribs, it's just not gonna help you as much. So if you're wearing a belt, breathe into your belly, push your belly out into your belt, and then hold that breath through the whole setup. The way that I like to use a belt is I will do whatever set I want to get to that day. I will always do all of my sets leading up to it without a belt, if I feel good. And then when I'm ready for that heaviest lift that I'm going to do today, I throw on the belt. It makes you feel extra confident. Know what numbers you feel comfortable with before putting on a belt, and then always try to increase that threshold of what you feel comfortable with. Try that method, warm up without using a belt, and then right before your last lift, throw the belt on, and I promise it will help you make bigger and heavier lifts. I am big on technique. I think that position comes first, patterns come second, and that is what creates performance. This is something that is, the foundation of everything that I do. When it comes to heavy weights, if you can just focus on the way that you're moving and not the weight that you're moving, then the weights become easy. If you focus on the weight, then you start to overthink things, fear starts to play into it. People don't see how many times I've walked up to that bar and failed it and it hasn't moved. Somebody told me, they were like, oh yeah, great lift. You looked like surprised when you made it. And I was like, yeah, that's because every other time I pulled on it, it hasn't moved at all. I've had hamstring injuries. I've had times where I've been really weak. I've had times where I feel really strong. this is the heaviest that I've been in my life. So, you know, they say mass moves mass. Maybe that has something to do with it. So I did 225 for 3. And then went to 315 for 3. And then put the greens on. That would be 365 for 3. Next interval, 365 went to 405. So 405 for 2. And then put the greens back on, 455 for 2. And then the last of the 2s, I did 495 for 2. Felt really easy. I put the greens on, and I was like, okay, so that's what, 545? And then I was like, you know what, let's put the 2.5s on. Let's do 550. 550 no belt was a breeze. This is the easiest that I've pulled this weight, and without a belt. Again, working up in confidence without a belt has like really helped my mental game when it comes to heavy deadlifts. So then I went from 550 right to 600. And so I was like, man, I know that it's there today. Like if I can hit 550 like that with that speed, then 600, you know, it's got to be there. And it moved and it came off the ground. So it was super cool. It was a long journey, like I said, to get here. But, you know, it was worth it for sure.
Okay, right, 315, 405, 495, plus 100 is 595, plus 2.5.
Pulling 600 was more of a mental thing than anything. It was a mental mountain that I needed to climb. You know, one of the mantras that I've kind of carried with me throughout my lifting journey is to respect the weight, but disrespect the barbell. So you want to be ruthless with that bar, but like you also need to have a respect for the weight and what, you know, what it means if you don't do it right. I hope this video was helpful. If it was, YouTube will recommend another video right here from me that you should check out next. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.